So the next module that we want to talk about quickly is installing Asterisk. So our goals are to, first of all, talk about the different version numbers of Asterisk, how the different releases of Asterisk work, talk about different methods you can use for installing Asterisk. Do you want to install from packages, or do you want to install from source, or do you want to install a custom, a custom Linux distribution built around Asterisk? We're going to talk about things like starting and stopping of Asterisk, connecting to the command line interface, and then setting Asterisk so it automatically starts up when your system starts up. Kind of the systems administration pieces of getting Asterisk up and running. All right? So before we dive into the actual installation itself, let's talk a little bit about how do the developers, when they're building Asterisk, how do they keep track of what work they do? And they use a source code control tool called Subversion. Now, if you're familiar with Linux and Linux development, you've probably heard of Subversion before. Subversion allows them to keep track of who made these changes, when, why, and how, so that it's not just a hodgepodge of code, but it's a little more organized. And if there is a problem, we can go back and identify when was that problem introduced, who made that mistake. Hey, we're going to give you a little coaching, a little help so that this problem doesn't happen again. And that really helps the maturity level within the code. And so Subversion uses this model of a tree. Now imagine a tree that's got a trunk and then it's got branches that come out from that trunk. Different release versions, like Asterisk 1.4 or 1.6.2 or 1.8, are different branches off of this tree. And so let me see if I can illustrate this graphically here for a second. Imagine that the development, anytime anybody's adding new code into Asterisk, it's on the trunk of that tree. And that tree just keeps getting taller and taller and taller over time as we do more development. Okay? From time to time, we want to branch off and say, hey, we want kind of a stable release that people can go out and run. We want a release version of Asterisk. And that's where we build a branch. So you can see at the bottom there, we branched for 1.4. We branched for 1.4, what, about 3 years ago? Has it been that long? What's that?
It was longer than that.
It was longer than that? It's been 4 years? It's been a while. But along that 1.4 branch, we don't add any new features. All we do is add bug fixes. So the further along that branch you get, you've got a nice, rock-solid, stable system. It may not have the latest features, but it's going to be rock solid. Then we did some more development, and a couple of years ago, we did the 1.6 branches, and 1.6.2 branch in particular. Branch it off. It's getting bug fixes, so you see like 1.6.2.10, 1.6.2.11, those sorts of things, right? Just a few days ago, a week or so ago, 1.8 was released. And so now you're going to see 1.8.1, 1.8.2, 1.8.3. As those new releases come out, there's going to be just bug fixes on that branch, while the developers can go off in the development tree in the trunk and start adding new features, making architectural changes without causing headache to the people who are trying to run a nice, stable PBX. Does that make sense? So if you're doing the key takeaway from this is if you're doing development, you probably want to be on the trunk. If you're trying to run a PBX and you want it to stay nice and stable and reliable, be using one of those versions off the branches. Okay? How often do they get pruned? That's a great question. We're supporting the 1.4 branch until the end of this year. I don't remember off the top of my head how long we're supporting the 1.6.2 branch. But the other branches, the basic idea is to support them for 3 years, and then they'll go into security fix-only mode for about another year, more or less. I'm sure Russell and Kevin will talk more about that in their presentation later this week. But that's the basic idea, is that we'll give you 2 or 3 years on a particular version. At that point, it'll go into a security fixes-only mode. We won't be fixing any bugs, but if there's a security problem that we know about and needs to be fixed, we'll still go fix that for approximately another year or so. And then you really need to move on. It's software and it's evolving very quickly. And after 3 years, it's probably time to go and get a new version. Again, it's not like the old box that you just hang on the wall and leave in your closet and leave it alone for 10 years. It really is just another server in your data center. Question over here.
Is there generally a process to upgrade from one branch to another? So if I've got all my customers on a 1.4 branch and now I've got to move to 1.6, is it just
yes.
forklift it out? Or?
No, usually most of the config files will come across just straight across. Anytime that we make a change that you need to be aware of, that you're going to have to go update your configuration files or change the way something works, we document that in a file called upgrade.txt. So if you go look at the Asterisk source code, there's a file called upgrade.txt, and then there's some like upgrade 1.4 to 1.6 and 1.6 to 1.8. There's some specific files there that we're going to outline every single step that we change that you're going to have to do something on your end to support that. If you're just going from minor versions, let's say you're using 1.8.0 today, and in a couple of weeks they release 1.8.1, usually everything will just come straight across. If there is something that you have to change your configuration files, again, it'll be listed in upgrade.txt. But usually with the minor versions, the config files just work just straight across. And you can just install the new version right over top of the old version. There's nothing special you have to do there. Okay.
Does that same rule apply to ABE versions?
I don't know. I didn't ever spend enough time in the ABE world to know for sure. There should be a document that describes any changes in config files. But I've been on the open source side of the house when I was working at Digium, and as a community member, I'll be honest, I could care less about the business versions of Asterisk. I'm an open source guy. So.
I thought it kind of been killed off anyways, maybe in favor of supporting open source.
It's not been completely killed off, but really, it used to be that the only way you could get support from Digium on Asterisk was to be running the business edition.
I like the fact that I can go to Digium for support.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running the call center.
Right. Now we support the open source version, so you can buy a support subscription on the open source version, and Digium will stand behind it. So it's a little different model. I think it's a better model. Yep. One more question back here. Sure. That's right. Right, and that's a really good point too. If you're doing upgrades from one version to another, if something's changed in the configuration file format, typically we'll warn you, like when you go from 1.2 to 1.4, in 1.4 we're going to warn you and say, hey, this syntax has been deprecated. You really want to go change to the new format. And then it won't be till the next major version that we get rid of that configuration option. So you really have two major versions typically to change and move over to the new format. We try to be as forgiving and flexible as we can there. Obviously, there's times when we can't be, but that's the general rules. We try to be very, very forgiving there. We understand that not everybody wants to go upgrade their PBX every 6 months and have to change config files and everything like that. It's, we want to eliminate as much pain as possible there. Okay, so this is kind of how we do our different versions of Asterisk. Now again, remember, if you're doing development, you probably want to be on the trunk because that's where it's going to be changing every day. That's where people like Russell, say hi Russell. Everybody wave to Russell back there. He's one of our lead developers. He's in there making changes all the time. It changes literally every few hours, if not more often than that. There's changes going on in Asterisk. Again, we have developers all over the world making changes. For the release versions, we usually have new release versions every few weeks or every few months, depending on which branch it is. It's much less churn, and again, those are bug fixes only along those branches. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, let's say I was going to go install Asterisk on this PC I have sitting over here. What would I really need? And there's really three pieces that I typically install on a system. There's obviously Asterisk itself. But there's a couple of other supporting libraries that are very, very useful. The first is a library called libpri, and that's the PRI protocol. PRI stands for Primary Rate Interface. It's an ISDN protocol. If you're using T1s and E1s, you're probably using the PRI protocol. And really, it's only needed if you do have PRI connections into Asterisk. That being said, it's a small library. I just load it on my systems as a course of habit, just to have it there just in case. The second piece is DOTI. And again, DOTI is the set of kernel drivers for the hardware cards inside your system. Even if you don't have Digium cards inside your system for analog and T1 sort of things, it's useful to have DOTI loaded anyway because it can help out with system timing and mixing and those sorts of things. So just, again, as a course of habit, just install it anyway. It's good to have on there. It's small. It's not going to take up much memory or anything, but it does add some useful features to your system. Okay? So these are the three things that you would want to go out and download and install on your system. Even if you're doing a VoIP-only system, you could get away without libpri. DOTI you still probably want to keep for a couple of things that we'll talk about, timing type things. And then obviously you need Asterisk. So again, libpri, you're probably talking 20K in disk space. I mean, it's tiny, but it's worth having on there. Just in the odd chance that, hey, I need a T1 plugged into this into the system. It's there and ready to go. All right. If you can't afford 20K, then you're smart enough not to do it. All right. One of the other things I want to point out about Asterisk is it does come with a lot of sound prompts. These were done by a professional voice talent out of Canada, a gal by the name of Allison Smith. And she's done over 1,000 different words and phrases, and some of them are hilarious. I mean, you've probably heard of them. Weasels have eaten our phone system, and nobody's here to take your call. They're off gambling and getting drunk. Great sound prompts out there. Things like, will you marry me? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. And you get to choose which sound packages you want to install. So when you go through the setup process of Asterisk, it's going to ask you, well, do you want the core sounds or the extra sounds? Do you want them in English or Spanish or French? I think somebody added UK or Australian English sometime just recently. And then you get to choose, well, what codecs do you want those in? Do you want those in WAV files? Do you want those in MULAW files? Do you want those in ALAW files? Do you want those in G729, G722, signed linear, all the different file formats as well. So lots of different choice there on sound packages. The next thing I want to talk about is what are you going to need on your system if you were going to compile Asterisk from source code. I would say probably 60%, 65% of the people using Asterisk do actually compile it from the source code. And so if you're going to compile it from the source code, you need a C compiler, like the free GCC compiler that comes with Linux. There's some system libraries that you're going to need, things like the OpenSSL libraries for encryption and strong authentication, the zlib library for compression, the Newt and NewtDevel libraries for the Dotty tools, the curses libraries for the Asterisk command line interface. But you also need to take a step back and say, what is it that I'm trying to get my PBX to do? If it's the case of you want your PBX to be able to go check the stock market or check things on the internet, those sorts of things, then you probably want the curl libraries on your system so it can go out, so that Asterisk can go out and interact with things on the internet. If you want your Asterisk system to send you an email notification when someone leaves you a voicemail, then you probably want some sort of mail transport agent installed on your machine. SendMail or Postfix or Exum or Qmail, take your pick, so that the system can send mail out to other mail servers. So be thinking about what are the sorts of things I want my system to do. Make sure you have those libraries. If you want Asterisk to talk to a database, make sure you have your database development libraries on the system. Okay? And that kind of leads us to, well, what are the different ways that I can install Asterisk? Obviously, some operating systems, Fedora for example, just shameless plug here, already have Asterisk packaged up and in part of the, as part of the operating system. So you can just say, hey, I want to install Asterisk, and it downloads and it runs. So that's an easy way. Sometimes, though, Linux distributions aren't always the best at keeping those packages up to date. Fedora is really good because I keep jabbing people and make sure that happens. But other Linux distributions don't always keep up on that. Obviously, if you do it from source, you have control over exactly what version you're installing it, exactly how you're building it, what options are compiled in, what options aren't. You have a little more control that way. Slightly more complicated, but you have full control there. The last way you can install it is as part of a larger Asterisk-based Linux distribution. So there are things out there like PBX in a Flash, or Trixbox, or Elastix, or Ast Linux. These are Linux distributions that are specifically built around Asterisk and Asterisk tools, so you can just install Linux and Asterisk and some third-party tools all at the same time, and not have to worry about, oh, I've got to install an operating system, I've got to install Asterisk, then I've got to install these other tools. Okay. Again, use which you're most comfortable with. If you're fine doing it from source, do it from source. You've got the ultimate control. If you want a little bit more consistency across a large number of systems, you may want to look more at doing it from packages or doing it from a custom distribution. Flexibility is key here. So. All right, let's talk just a minute about, say, I've got Asterisk up and running. Now how do I interact with it? The primary way that you interact with an Asterisk system as an administrator is through the command line interface. And I know there's people out there who say, can't I just have a drag and drop click and thing to do? There are third-party GUIs out there for Asterisk. There's plenty of them out there. I'm sorry, I'm a command line guy, so I'm going to teach you the command line because this gives you the ultimate flexibility. I promise if you learn how to use the CLI, it'll really come in handy. One of the things you have